Hey guys, this is Myk, and today I would like to share with you what I believe a couple of steps that every marketing team should go through to create the marketing playbook that allows them to be more effective with their marketing in general. So the last week I conducted a full 4-day workshop with the company. And our goal was to cover multiple topics. We wanted to create a brand, story, strategic messaging, content strategy, and distribution, customer acquisition process. And there's a couple of things that I figured out during this process, because I believe there's one thing of understanding the knowledge and information that you want to convey, but there's a whole other thing of actually creating a way of educating and teaching the company, an organization, or even an individual to follow through the steps and to create that marketing playbook. So first we wanted to create a brand story. But we started with understanding customer profile. And I know it's simple, and I know that everybody talks and they understand the customers. It's worth starting and having that session with your team to understand who are your customers. It's not just who are your customers, but also what role do the different type of customers play, or different types of people that play a certain role in the buying process. What you also want to understand is not just, oh, this is a pain that they have, but try to write it out, like what other day looks for them. What do they do during the day? What kind of pain they deal with? What are the things that they need to accomplish? Also, aside of just thinking about, just effective and do something more efficient and save money, think about the feelings and attachments that you want to convey to your customers, because as you're going to create a brand story, you will have to create a customer hero journey, so that the customer before he met you, before he interacts with you, have a certain world that they live in and certain feelings that they have. And your brand story needs to sort of walk them through all of the things and bring them into the new realm, into the new way of understanding what is the new world with you looks like, how the feeling will improve, and that would lead to understanding what type of story and what type of messaging to create. So start with understanding your customers. Understand who they are, what organization they're from, what their tools that they use, what are the responsibility they have, how do they measure things that they do, outline the day in life that they have, outline the pain that they have. And when you do that, also understand what kind of pain do they have. Is it an active pain, something that they really have a big problem and they're looking for a solution? Is it a passive pain where I know there's a pain, but I'm not looking for some reason, I don't look for any solution outside? Or if it's a latent pain where I don't really know that I have a pain, and I'm certainly not aware that some sort of solution exists. So when you have that understanding of a customer feelings, of the customer day, of this customer all around 360 view of your customers, then you can move into creating your story. So when you create your story, there are different multiple frameworks. I would recommend a book, Story Brand. I would also recommend a couple of articles that Andy Raskin wrote on creating a brand story. I would also recommend the story, a book by Robert McKee, who helps people understand how the story happens in Hollywood and how the storytelling helps convey a certain message. Because what happens, the main goal of marketing is to get people attention. And if you don't believe that this is the case, just look at a couple examples that one of them would be Kelly Jenner recently was named the youngest self-made billionaire, and the part of that process her building that brand and cosmetic brand that generates millions, hundreds of millions of dollars of revenue, and that her ability to gain attention, her ability to communicate to their customers. So the first thing you want to do is to figure out, so how do you create, how do you get people attention? And it's not just by creating content. What you want to do is you want to make people care. You want to make sure that your story that you talk into is memorable and compelling. You want to make sure that story resonates with them. And when you tell your stories, you want to picture them all different aspects of the world that they live right now. This is a one bad situation there right now. With us, you're gonna be in this better situation in terms of your success, in terms of your feelings. Also, you want to paint the big changes in the industry, something that happens whether they like it or not, and that could be economic changes, social changes, it could be technological changes, and that would allow you to build the story where you can reuse in your marketing content. So when we got to create that story, our next step was to take that and create a high tier strategic messaging. So this is what Simon Sinek called the why, how, and what. After you have that story, you understand different steps that the customer goes through that story. You understand how they measure. You understand that there's certain magic gifts that can help them go through the obstacles, which essentially is your features of your product. Then you create that. Then you take that and you create a top tier messaging. You know, why do you exist as an organization? What do you believe in? How do you want to solve or want to go towards your vision? And then what? How do you explain what you do in a simple term that people can relate to? So when you have that done, the next step is strategic messaging. And strategic messaging basically taking your different types of your customers, breaking down them into the roles, and actually creating a value messages for each specific pain that you solve for each one of them. And when you have that value outline, you also have a proof points and metrics to support that. And at some point, that could be case studies, that could be a certain piece of content. And in metrics, it should be something that they daily deal with or they report on or something that they really care about. So when you created this strategic messaging, the next step for you is to understand how customers buy. So the process there is you try to create a visual diagram of how your customer signs up to your product. What happens next? Does the customer get contacted by a salesperson right away? Do they receive an email? And then you break down on different steps that they need to achieve to get to the aha moment in your product, and you want to measure that. And when you get to understanding of that step, then you're breaking down to your sales process and how they understand your product and how they buy your product all the way until they pay for your product, until they become a customers. And then you can break that down into how the customer onboarding happens. Does your customer success actually calls, how many times, whether they send emails, how often they get in contact with the customer to make sure that your new features, your vision is consistently communicated with your current customers. Because at the end of the day, retention of your customers starts all the way at the beginning of the process. Because if you target the right customers, the probability that you're going to retain those customers is much better. But at the same time, when they are on the customer level, you want to have a continuous conversation with them going forward. So now you have a brand, you created this profile of your target customers, or maybe target customers if it's a marketplace or a multi-site solution. Then you have your brand story, and it's a big story. Sometimes it actually pays to create sub-brand stories for each customers, because they'll have a different changes in their industry. They'll have different pains that you want to bring up. Then you have strategic messaging, and strategic messaging is basically the wording and the messages that you will use in your nurturing campaigns, in your content strategy, in your website, and so forth. When you have that, then you can move into the content strategy, because content strategy is the way of communicating your story. It's a way of communicating in all different ways through all different channels how exactly you're going to help customers. So one of the main keys of effective content strategy is being able to understand customer acquisition process, because you want to have a content on every single step of the process, because every single step that the customer takes, they're going to have some objections, they're going to have some things they need to decide in the buying process, and you want to have the content ready that you can push this content to them. And so for example, your customers will have an objection. So almost every time your salespeople will hear sort of similar objections. So every time you hear an objection more than twice or three times, create a content around it. So it's not only will teach salespeople how to talk to the customer on the phone and how to diagnose the problem that they have, but also allow them to get off the phone and then send email saying, hey, you know, I understand your problem. I understand you. I'm empathetic to your problem. And by the way, this is how we solve this problem for somebody else. And this is how this is the question that you raised as an objection, and this is what we can do about it, and this is our response to it. So this way you have your content, and it's always feed up with through the sales process, and it also generates views that comes to your website from it. So that is a content strategy. What one part, as I said, it's a step-by-step targeting customer acquisition process. But at the same time, you want to talk about different pains. You want to create stories that not necessarily about your product, but talk about the pain that the customers have. Also, what is very more common from companies that understand marketing, that it's not just discussing the pains that your customers have that you can help us. It's more sort of relating to the customers. It's bringing your target customers as a leader and positioning them as somebody of expertise. So in the content strategy, that could be seen as taking and doing an interviews with your customers, if it's not a case study, but actually understanding it and picturing the problem. Tell us about your problem. Tell us about how you try to solve this problem. Explain us in details what processes you went through, what is the decision you had to make to solve this problem. And then the reader and your potential customers can make a connection that, oh my God, I will be related to the problem. I have the same exact problem. And then in my mind, as a prospect and a reader, I will connect the dot that this is a problem that you discussed, and this is a solution that you actually provide. And you're not necessarily to be very pushy about talking about your product. What it's more important is not to sell your product, but sell your pain. Sell the pain that you solve. So that is what comes to content strategy. The other piece is that every good marketing playbook should have is distribution process. So during the workshop, we went through some ideas and different types of content and how the content could be sliced and diced in a different way to maximize the exposure, that you get as much attention and reach from your content as possible. So if you know how many resources you have, outline your awareness and educational stage. How many content? Was it going to have 2 or 3 articles that you're going to create this week? Either you're going to interview some customers or bring some influencers that you can talk to. Then the selection, let's say you want to create one piece of content in the selection. That could be comparison, that could be comparing your product versus other product, that could be talking about objections the customer face. And the third sort of subsection is training educational. This is a how-to content, because how-to content can be also helpful when somebody decides whether to use your product or not, because if it takes too long to get on board, if it takes too complicated of a process to create APIs, that's how you want to know those up front. You want to communicate that things are easy and create content around that. So then when you have those big pieces of content, always I advise you to have some sort of plans to create big pieces of content uh, at least twice or once per 2 months or once per 3 months, because when you create a longer piece of content, you can actually concentrate on a bigger picture. For example, like how do language translation industry operates? It's a very big, or how they can be more efficient, or how you know, anything that could be becoming a big ebook. So when you have that content, you have time to create, then you can break down this content in different chapters or parts, and each of them could be reused and pushed on a weekly basis. So you take chapter one, you publish it on your blog on Monday, linking back to your original ebook. Then on Tuesday or Wednesday, for example, a couple of days later, you publish it on Medium, giving the link back to your publication. Then you create summary of this content chapter, and then you post it on LinkedIn, for example, and all of that create that sort of linking back to this original big ebook. And this is why it's sort of important to have the sort of what I call wave release, pieces by piece. Every single week you take one chapter and you promote it. Always, of course, that after each time you have a new release or sub-release of this content, you promote it through social networks. What you also can do is put together 5 to 10 publications that are in your industry, and take that content, and before you really release it, create a summary of it, so it's a unique content, and maybe include the link to your ebook, and pitch it to the publication as a guest post. Of course, you should not be talking about your product. Of course, you should not be talking about yourself, because you want to position that as the industry, and the publication should accept your content because you are helping them, because their readers will love it. And at the same time, you help to spread your message. You help to educate, and you help to drive traffic to some degree to your website and to your ebook. So make sure that you build out this process of distributing your content. Also, when it comes to content strategy, you want to make sure that you at least create some sort of basic steps in the process. Idea creation, editing, approval, when it gets scheduled. Because what you want to do is you want to track over time how long it takes for you to create content. And you do that, and as you outline the process, you optimize it for better and better use. So when at some point maybe you see an industry news that comes out, or there's something happens in the industry that you want to respond, you train your organization that maybe you can respond to that news in 1 or 2 days, and actually capitalize on the wave of news and information that's out there. And that will allow you to create a consistent traffic back to you, and actually respond to something that happens in the industry, and increase your reach and engagement. So think about the good example here I would like to give you is from a company software that I work, which is antivirus software solution. So every time there's a new virus happening, we had the page created in a matter of hours, and that page had unique content. And when you see the news on CNN will break down, people start searching, we will be on the first page already in antivirus, and people will search, and people will be able to sort of associate our brand with something that, okay, we understand that things happen in our industry, and we respond very quickly. So of course, if you have a small team and you don't have those resources to create, but when you have the process of creating content over time, over 3 months, over 6 months, over 12 months, you continuously go through this process, and you train your organization to respond quicker and quicker. So you at some point will graduate where you can create content on the fly. So this is a couple of things that I would like to share. And to summarize, if you want to create a great and effective marketing playbook for your organization, first, understand your customers and make sure they understand their feelings, what they use, their technologies. And I've wrote about that on my Medium post, so go check them out. Two, create a brand story. Create a brand story for your organization, for your primary customer. If you have some sub-customers, create brand stories for them, especially if you're a marketplace. Step three, take that and story and build a strategic messaging, because strategic messaging allows you to create different messages that could be reused on a daily basis on your website, on your nurturing campaigns. You can A/B test them, but those are the messages that help you sort of support the pain. They talk about pain. Those messages and those pains should also have proof points and examples, case studies of how this should be solved, or maybe some of your customers, and of course metrics. You want to say it. You don't want to create customer case studies if you just say in general terms of like, hey, we're better, we came in and did it better. You want to make sure that you say that, hey, this is X and now it's Y and it's much better. So the next step is content strategy, content distribution. So make sure you understand the content creation process, making sure you understand this publishing process, and make sure you understand the distribution process, and you have a certain outline step that you need to take every time you release the content. So also with content, don't just think about it monthly. Create industry reports or benchmark reports based on your product data and release it every 2 months or 3 months. But if you think about the content more, larger content as well, that takes longer time to create, the likability that you create a better content will increase, and you can then push that content for the next months or 2 months or so on. So then also make sure that you create customer acquisition process, because customer acquisition process puts all this visually. You can see that, what's the steps customers takes, what's your nurturing campaign, where's your buckets of customers that you want to talk to, and what are the emails and what are the messages they get using your content strategy. Also look into what your sales processes looks like, what are the steps they're taking, and how long it takes. So that is the basics for creating effective marketing playbook, and I hope you enjoyed it. This video came out to be a little bit longer than I expected, but I think that some of you will finish it and some of you will find it helpful. And if you are interested to learn more about my workshop and how I do things, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. Follow me on Facebook, and I write on my website mykpono.com, where you can see more in-depth articles on strategic messaging, on customer acquisition processes, and how to create customer campaigns. Thank you.